Sarkisian. Now, how about this? TCU and SMU, they're meeting. They play early, 11 o'clock on Saturday. That game at SMU is sold out. Also sold out is this game in, Lawrence, Kansas. Kansas and Duke, and that's not basketball. We know that both teams unbeaten. KU off to a fantastic start as well. Of course, both teams unbeaten. Both of those games are sellouts, and I love to see it.
Yeah, it's been a long time since Kansas has had one for sure, and it's they've now taken the college football world by storm, and everybody, it's a great story because I feel like everybody out there is kind of rooting for them a little bit, unless you really just hate Kansas, but. They've been so bad for so long to at least see them fun to watch. And that's the thing about teams like Colorado and Georgia Tech. I really feel for their fans because, when you just know that you're going to go out there and just nothing's good going to happen. And that's where Kansas has been. Lance Leipold in year 2 has just shot life into this program. And they're not only winning games, but they're fun to watch doing it. They'll be fun to watch when they lose games. They're a fun watch.
Yeah. Max Olson, who's normally with us Thursdays, he'll be with us tomorrow just after 3 when we start the show, wrote a story today on Daniels, the quarterback at KU. And it's obviously it's a very good story. So if you haven't seen it, if you don't subscribe to theathletic.com, it is there.
Yeah, I mean, if they win a couple more games, we're going to get to the point where we dislike them all of a sudden. I mean, that's kind of the trajectory that they're on, where they've been fun, and now they're going to start beating teams. And we're going to go, wait a second, you're kind of annoying now because you're not supposed to be this good. But yeah, I mean, they're charging directly towards bowl territory. A win this weekend would be massive in that regard. Mike Elko's done a good job with Duke up to this point, but I think Kansas is pretty much the favorite from what I've seen across the board for anybody who's really discussed this game. So that's where they are now. That, not only is not every game just considered to be some blowout loss and how embarrassing can it get, but they're getting, picked to win games against other Power 5 teams from around the country, even if, Duke's not, Clemson football or something like that. The strides that have been made are absolutely massive, and I think that's awesome. As far as the battle for the Iron Skillet, that's a really interesting game. I'm not surprised it's sold out because I think TCU fans are still – wanting to figure out exactly what they're going to be under Sonny Dykes, and there's reasons for optimism. There's also still a lot of questions, but SMU's got a good thing going with Rhett Lashley right now. I think, obviously the Sonny Dykes element to this game spices it up significantly. He wants to get a little measure of revenge against his old team, I'm sure, and they hate him now because he left them for the team across, the next town over. So yeah, there's going to be some bad blood in that game, but going back to Kansas and that sellout versus the one between TCU and SMU, I don't blame College Game Day or Big Noon Kickoff for not going to SMU and TCU. Like, I don't think that that's some big national game for most people. I think it's ridiculous that everybody's going to the same game when we have multiple shows and no one's going to the Kansas game. I think that that's a real shame, and shame on those broadcasts that do that. Like, I know that Tennessee-Florida is a huge game. I know that's the one that's going to get more social network play. I know that's the one that get more views on YouTube and all that jazz. But, like, what's the point of having different shows if we're all going to the same game? Somebody go to Kansas. Like, it's an awesome story, man. It's a great story. They haven't been good in a long time, and they're sitting here with not some schlub opponent. Like, it's Duke. But I think, again, Duke's off to a nice start with Mike Elko.
Why did they go to Boone, North Carolina? Because it was a great story.
Yeah.
And that's the same reason if they were to go to Lawrence, Kansas, that would be the reason.
And before I get the guy with the SEC tattoo, like, yelling about how great the rivalry between Tennessee and Florida is, I totally get that, and I totally think that there should be College Game Day or Big Noon Kickoff or whoever out there. I just don't think that everybody should be at the same spot. That's all. Like, somebody go to Kansas and cover this awesome Jayhawk start, because you're sure as heck going to be talking about their head coach for the next 2 months and what big school he's about to go to.
Yeah, and here's the other thing about it. It's not – Tennessee and Florida is not the Super Bowl. It's not the only game in town. The reason everybody goes to the Super Bowl, it's the only game in town. But Tennessee and Florida is one, and this is not – if this was last weekend where there's not a whole lot of good games – this weekend, there's a lot.
Yeah.
I could justify 9 games that you could go to, Kansas and Duke chief among them. And just because you're like, when's the next time you're going to do a raucous crowd in Lawrence, Kansas? Not only that, Big Noon Kickoff Fox and College Game Day both don't have Tennessee and Florida. That game's on CBS.
Well, you hope they don't make those decisions, but they do based on usually who they have. But in this case, you're right. But so that's that. Those two teams, I love those two games, TCU and SMU. Again, Kansas and Duke, both games are sold out.
And to be very clear, I'm not knocking Tennessee, Florida, and I'm not knocking going to that game. I grew up in the 90s. I know how special that rivalry was. And I know that there's a feeling of wanting to rekindle that. And maybe this is one of those matchups this year that, will help pave the way towards getting back to the glory days of Tennessee and Florida. Josh Heupel's doing a great job. Billy Napier and Anthony Richardson have come back down to earth quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, but they're still fun, especially when, he was cooking like he was at the beginning of the year, just doing some crazy stuff. So I get it, and I get that game will be the bigger rating by far, and it'll have, way more fans and all that jazz. I know it's a numbers game. Everything ultimately is, but, yeah, somebody share the love and be a little bit different and go to the other really intriguing game, even if it's not going to have 100,000-plus people packing it out. That's all.
Florida won last year 38-14. I thought they would have played more, but they have not. I think it's 51 times that they've played. Florida has won 31 and Tennessee 20.
When I was a senior in high school,